does not assume responsibility for overturned beds or footprints on ceilings.
I don't know, but I heard tell the WB's the place. With them great new shows, anything goes, even worms in outer space. There's a tweeted bird, a hot rod dog, the boy named Damien, a singing frog. We got WB's got people all having fun. Well, what are you doing? There's nothing on TV.
Yeah.
Well, you turn that channel straight to the WB.
Word, number one.
There's kids who live in a water tower, a krypton guy with superpower. He's that frown and set on down in front of kids WB. The party's hot at the Wanna Lot. Everyone's on a roll. Folks already and throwing confetti and everything's out of control. Well, we'll stick a bomb in Daffy's bed and drop an anvil on someone's head. We got WB's got everybody having fun.
In 1995, cable television would be changed forever with the introduction of, to this day, one of the most watched, most liked, and overall best blocks to ever air on TV. That's right. Today I'm talking about the amazing, the incredible, the outstanding Kids WB. Alright, listen. I know what you're all are thinking. Kids WB, why? That's so random. What are you doing? I get it. But over the years of me examining and talking about and learning more about classic Looney Tunes cartoons, I've gained a bigger appreciation for Looney Tunes on television. Because when I grew up, there was Bugs Bunny and Tweety Show, and Bugs and Daffy and all that fun stuff, so that's how I got to introduce myself to that. But Looney Tunes itself has been on many different networks like Nickelodeon and Fox, for example. It wasn't until Kids WB that they actually had a place that they could call home, you know, because Warner Brothers owns the darn characters, so it made sense to bring them back over. But not only Looney Tunes, but Animaniacs, Tiny Toons, Batman, Superman, Freakazoid, even Pokemon had a place to call home on Kids WB. Now, of course, it's mostly compared to its sister network Fox with Fox Kids, which had its own hit shows such as X-Men, Power Rangers, and even Digimon. Kids WB managed to stay alive for a crazy 14 years, with each passing year getting crazier and crazier with the amount of content they were able to shovel up and give to the public. So because I'm a big nerd, and because it's the Slasher KZ Summer of Animation, plug here, I think it'd be a fun idea to go and look back on some of their best hits and relive those glory days and see what made them so good to begin with. Now, I'm aware I am not the first person to talk about these shows, but, you know, I have a little bit of a different spin because, you know, I'm a bit of, I was born a bit of the younger generation, a bit in Kids WB's later half, so I have a bit of a different take on all the shows that they went ahead and produced. So, we'll be looking at a few of those today and seeing how good or how bad they were. So, without further ado, sit back, grab a carrot, and let's look back at the amazing Kids WB. Alright, now the first show, or batch of shows I'm going to be talking about is, of course, Looney Tunes. Now, Looney Tunes, of course, is the golden goose, or used to be the golden goose for Warner Brothers. And even before they started licensing out other shows, Looney Tunes was really the only big one that they had to offer, because they had at least 30 to 40 years of classic cartoons that they could run on their network, because beforehand, Looney Tunes cartoons on TV were running since the early 60s with, like, the Bugs Bunny show and Roadrunner show. But then when the 90s came around with Kids WB, they had to revamp and reorganize the shows, which is why we had such classics as the Bugs Bunny and Tweety show, Merry Melody starring Bugs Bunny and Friends, Bugs and Daffy, and etc., just so they could package the cartoons all together and people could watch them for free, because this was before the internet and you could only really watch them on TV or VHS tapes. And the 90s was a very specific time because that's when the characters, and for Looney Tunes specifically, got really big again, because there was a little bit of a downgrade during the 70s and 80s, but the 90s popped up, boom, you could see Looney Tunes toys and Happy Meals and Burger King Kids Meals. They were all over clothes, shows, toys, even Space Jam came out in 1996. Looney Tunes were on top of the world, and specific characters like Bugs, Taz, and even Marvin the Martian had increased popularity during this time. Like, you couldn't go anywhere without seeing Bugs and Taz with backwards caps, wearing peace signs and dollar signs, looking all hip and rappery. I don't even know. Just to get yourself a little bit of an idea here. But they had all these compilation shows, and their popularity started rising and rising. This led to spin-off shows such as Tiny Toons. Now, Tiny Toons, personally for me, I haven't seen too much of it. I know a bit about it, but I haven't seen the show. But in essence, the show basically stars younger kid versions of the Looney Tunes characters like Bugs and Daffy, Lola, Porky, and so on, as they attend the Acme Looniversity, where the older Toons teach the younger Toons about being loony. And the show did a very good job at making the characters younger. So instead of Bugs, who was, he was there, but we had Buster Bunny. Instead of Daffy, we had Plucky Duck. Porky, we had Hampton, so on and so forth. So a good chunk of the main cast had characters there to fill out their roles. Now, yes, some had bigger implications than others, like there was a lot more focus on Buster and Plucky, as opposed to Wily and Roadrunner's counterparts. I think it's Zippy and Calamity. I don't really have that much of a knowing about it, but anyway. So they would show them in countless situations, and because they're kids, it would be the classic type of thing like, oh, they don't really like school too much, I want to be kids and have fun, blah, 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 and had all these fun things too. And the show was actually really well written because it had funding and production from Steven Spielberg. Yeah, Steven Spielberg worked on these shows, and it was the first show to bring in this animation renaissance for Warner Brothers, at least for the 90s. And he helped co-fund them, and he helped with several other shows, such as Animaniacs, Freakazoid, Toonsylvania, Hysteria, and so on and so forth. So, really speaking, you could thank Steven Spielberg for your childhood, in essence. But unfortunately, Tiny Toons, they only run for about 2 years, but it had a great life in reruns, afterwards, because even though the show only made consistently new episodes for 2 years, the show went on to syndication, and it basically outlived most of the other shows that were on the networks, and it ran for a good solid decade on TV. Now, it's not running now, of course, because Saturday mornings don't really exist anymore, but it was really a really cool thing to see that this show lasted longer as well. Even going back to the compilation shows as well, they really did have a life of their own. I mean, of course now, there aren't really as many compilation shows as there used to be, but the fact that we had these shows made at all proves that Warner Brothers did actually care for the older shorts and older characters, as opposed to making new ones altogether. But, that's just that. But really, Looney Tunes in the 90s had a really big renaissance, and it's a shame that, it's still big today, but not as big as it was. But yeah, Looney Tunes was still a very big part of Kids WB. It was the prime programming, and, it's that special part that made Warner Brothers who they were. So, but Looney Tunes, definitely a top pick, but it wasn't the best show on there, which we'll get to in just a second.
Coming on the way, time to laugh, so let's begin. Notify your next of kin. Daffy Duck is starring in the Bugs and Daffy. Make 'em laugh, the Bugs and Daffy Show. Prepare to be blown away.
I think the idea of superhero shows have gone a long way since their inception. I mean, we can go as far back as the early 60s to see that Marvel was doing some pretty crazy things with their comic characters, such as Spider-Man, the Fantastic Four, even the Avengers of all characters. But the 90s was a really interesting time for not only superheroes, but animation. As you've seen in the other entries, animation got a very big resurgence during the 90s, and led to some very popular shows. Most notably, of course, Looney Tunes, Animaniacs, Tiny Toons, Freakazoid, and so on. But some people might argue that the biggest, and not the best, goes to Batman the Animated Series. Batman the Animated Series is one of those shows that you can argue that it not only changed superhero shows, but animation in general. Because in the 90s, there was no other show like Batman that took itself that seriously. It told serious and adult stories. It delved with actual character development, loss, heartbreak, so much villainy, and shows the pain that comes with being a superhero and even a villain. The show itself, even 25 years later, is remembered by so many so fondly of how amazing it was. And it's contributed to a number of factors. I mean, I'm not going to go ahead and say that just because the show had a dark tone, it was amazing. It's a good reason why, but it's not the actual reason behind it. I mean, it can be attributed to the voice cast, for one. The voice cast of Kevin Conroy's Batman and Mark Hamill's The Joker are still being remembered as some of the best voice casting for any animated show ever. Now, granted, in the 90s, there were still some very amazing voice artists going along, like Rob Paulsen, Jeff Bergman, and so on. But Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill gave this special intuition, this special gravitas to Batman and the Joker that are still being remembered today. I mean, when you look at any animated thing revolving around Batman, you instantly hear Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill. I mean, even some of the video games, like the Arkham games, Mark Hamill was there performing as the Joker, which was very interesting to see and very fun to hear his great voice. I mean, it's really crazy to think that he went from Luke Skywalker to the Joker. And I think he is the best person who's done the Joker performance since Jack Nicholson in 1989. It's crazy to think that a voice could go so far along. I mean, even today, some voice artists, such as Mel Blanc, for example, who voiced all the Looney Tunes, are still being remembered for their great voice work. I mean, it's just great, fantastic. I don't want to talk about it too much because I could talk about these for hours. But the voice cast is one of the best I've ever seen in any cartoon. Then we move on to the animation. Now, the animation is something that is by far one of the most unique things about this thing. I'm not going to harp on it too long, but basically, they started every single shot on black paper to keep the dark aesthetic of the show consistent. You know, most shows, they start on white paper, and it looks very light and clean. But Batman started with black paper to keep this atmosphere the same. And it really had helped to give you the more adult, grown-up tone that they were looking for to tell these very serious stories. I mean, some episodes, like I said, dealt with death, some dealt with loss, some dealt with serious injury, some family issues even. So, because they kept that tone consistent, it really did help with the reality of what was going on. And this helped with very interesting characters. I mean, one of the main additions to the show was Harley Quinn, Dr. Harley Quinzel, a psychiatrist who used to work for Arkham Asylum, who would interrogate the Joker, but then he got in her head, and then he became her second in command. And Harley Quinn, as much as some of my friends might like to joke at it, Harley Quinn is one of my favorite characters in all of Batman media. I don't know why. She just has this certain goofiness, but also this very vicious craziness that you can't run away from, and I really do love it. Her signature mallet is fantastic, and I love it. And just everything to go along with that character. Even today, she was in the Suicide Squad, and she was fantastic. But I digress. Now, this show is really special. Now, granted, I haven't seen much of the show, but I've seen many videos regarding the show. But it is a very special show in superhero media because people might argue it's the spawn of the DC the DC Animated Universe, because this show spawned multiple shows such as its sister show, Superman the Animated Series, which I have not seen at all, but it's essentially the Superman version of Batman. It's the same type of show done by the same people, and it's a lot more lighthearted because it's Superman, but it takes place in the same world. I mean, Batman did have some crossover in that show, but Superman was a prime contender for that show. We also had other shows like Static Shock, the Justice League, Batman Beyond, Justice League Unlimited, so on and so forth, Young Justice, which continued on this very linear and straight path line. So in conclusion, Batman the Animated Series is not only a show that inspired animation and superheroes, but really pop culture in general. Even all these years later, it is still being labeled as one of the best shows of all time. Honestly, being a big Batman fan myself, it's one of the best things I've ever seen with the Caped Crusader. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. It's one of the best shows I think you will ever see in terms of animation. It's great. And it was one of Kids WB's most successful properties in its early heyday. But in 1997, a certain Japanese show came around that completely exploded in popularity in a way that no one ever expected.
Pikachu.
Its name is Pikachu.
Oh, it's so cute. It's the best of all.
You'll see.
Oh, hi, Pikachu. Pika.
It's also known as Electric Mouse. It's usually shy, but can sometimes have an electrifying personality.
I see what you mean.
Shocking, isn't it?
That joke is so dumb, but why is it so funny every time? Oh my god. If you were to look up the most popular Kids WB shows over its lifetime, you'd probably get some answers like Tiny Toons, Animaniacs, Batman, Superman, Static Shock, Teen Titans, and so on. But some might argue that the most popular show not only changed the way the network would deliver its programming, but would change how the West would view a little thing called anime. Pokemon, you'd say, was the breakout smash hit that nobody saw coming. I mean, it wasn't really even made in the US, it was made in Japan, and all we did in the West here was dub it with English lines. But the impact of the show was so huge that the youth of the early 2000s and late 90s were obsessed with it. Like, it was everywhere. Now, before I should talk about the impact of the show, I should probably talk about what Pokemon is actually about for, like, the 3 people who don't know what it is. So basically, we follow 10-year-old Pokemon trainer Ash Ketchum and his partner Pikachu, who travels along with a few friends, collecting gym badges, thwarting bad guys, and of course, catching all the Pokemon. And the anime itself has lasted a spectacular 25 years on the air, going to each generation following alongside the games. The impact of the anime is something that cannot be overstated. For lots of people, this was the first anime they ever saw. This was the first anime I ever saw, and at that point, nobody really knew what anime was. It wasn't really as big as it was today. I mean, sure, we had some things like Cowboy Bebop, Dragon Ball, Sailor Moon, and whatnot, but Pokemon was really the first one that people in the West would be like, that is really cool, I like that art style, and introduced us to really popular and memorable characters. Like, people today, even me, still remember Misty, Brock, you know, May, Max, all these characters like that. Although nowadays Ash is traveling along with nobody, which is weird. But you know, the back in the days when the anime was regularly good is when I remember the anime being really awesome. And just seeing those episodes after school or before school was a real treat. I grew up during the 3rd generation of Pokemon. So Ruby and Sapphire, Fire Red Leaf Green, the advanced generation, that was my generation. That'll tell you guys how old I actually am. But I grew up with Battle Frontier, Diamond and Pearl, and all that. So that's my generation. But I can easily look back on the Gen 1 and Gen 2 animes and say that shit was really good. Now, despite all the controversy, you know, with the voice actors and the animation changes and all that, Pokemon is still regained relevancy all these years later and has been constantly on the air for this long, proves how good of a show it really is. I mean, it basically invaded Kids WB and became its most popular show popular show behind Batman and Superman. Just think about that for a second. Beyond those DC heroes, it was the most popular. And you couldn't go anywhere without seeing Pokemon anywhere. Like, there was the TV show, there were movies, multiple movies made, there were the games. The trading card game was a huge phenomenon and broke way for other things like Yu-Gi-Oh! And Digimon to pop through with their card games. There were toys, there were t-shirts, there were fruit snacks, there was cereal. Everything you could think of, you could see Pikachu's little mug on it, and it shows how great this actually was. I can't describe how big this show was, because it was really big, and it paved the way for more anime to come forth. Like I mentioned, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Digimon, Dragon Ball GT and Super. Now we have other animes like Gundam, we have Hamtaro, we have all this fun stuff here, and it even inspired other blocks to get other animes, like Fox Kids, the sister network to Kids WB, got Digimon, which is a similar concept to Pokemon, except instead of catching Pokemon, these were like digital creatures in a digital world. I didn't watch Digimon growing up, that was more of a Kendall thing. My buddy Kendall, he knows more about Digimon. You know, there was that. Even Cartoon Network, which is the empire of kids cartoon programming in the US, started Toonami in 2007, which is just masterful. I'm sorry, not 2007, 1997, my bad. It would inspire them to bring all this anime together and introduce people to more and more anime, and it was fantastic. Like, you can't like say how good or how big this show was. And even though it's not as big as it was in the late 90s, early 2000s, it's still a big fat, and it is the most profitable multimedia brand behind Mario, in front of Mario, Hello Kitty, Mickey Mouse, Batman, what have you. It is the most popular because it has the most recognizable brands. If you see Pikachu, you know it's a Pokemon product and you know how good it's gonna be. But I digress. I'm not gonna go into the whole marketing thing about Pokemon. We know this show is amazing. And that first movie, man, you cannot tell me that first movie is straight fire. I mean, it's one of the only, I think, like, it's the only Pokemon movie that was in theaters. I might be wrong about that, but it was one of the only ones that was in theaters, which shows how good it actually was and built up its lore over time. I mean, back in the day, there was only 151 Pokemon. Now there's like 800 something. So, you know, the series has grown gargantuanly over the past 25 years. But I digress. Pokemon for me is my favorite franchise of all time. It was my first fandom, my first obsession. I love it to hell and back. It is that good. If you haven't seen Pokemon, go ahead and see it. It's everywhere. You can see it anywhere you really want to. It's fantastic. You will not regret it. It's awesome. I love it. That's enough about Pokemon. You get it's one of the greatest animes, or one of the greatest shows to influence modern culture, and that's why it is the most popular and the best show on Kids WB. Alright, and there you have it. Those are only a fraction of the shows that were on Kids WB. Now, I know there's a bunch more out there. I know there's even Fox Kids out there, but those are the shows that me personally, I think impacted the network the most. I mean, yeah, there's Freakazoid, Static Shock, Teen Titans, and so on. But I think these three shows did the most good and most great things to make the network as noticeable as it is today. So that's really about that. I thank you all for watching this video, and I will be back hopefully soon with brand new animation content. I'm planning all things out. Fox Kids, The Zone, everything. So thank you for watching, you guys. Click that subscribe button if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys next time for more awesome animation content.